Lynn May walked through the glass doors of Westfield Corporation for the third week in a row, clutching her simple brown bag lunch and wearing the same navy blue cardigan she'd worn twice already this week. Nobody noticed. That was fine with her. She preferred it that way. Or at least that's what she told herself as she made her way to her desk in the accounting department. The office buzzed with the usual Monday morning energy. People sharing weekend stories, laughing at inside jokes and planning lunch meetups. Lynn slipped past these small gatherings unnoticed, like a shadow moving through bright sunlight. "Morning," she said softly to Tyler, the young man at the desk beside hers. He glanced up from his phone, nodded quickly, and returned to his scrolling. That was about as much interaction as she'd had with anyone since starting here. Lynn settled into her chair and turned on her computer. Her desk was the plainest in the office. No family photos, no funny coffee mugs, no plants. Just a small calendar and a neatly organized stack of folders. She pulled up the spreadsheet she'd been working on Friday and began entering numbers with quiet efficiency. Across the room, Olivia's laugh rang out. Lynn glanced up briefly. Olivia was the unofficial social director of the accounting department. Tall, confident, with perfect hair, and a knack for making people feel either very special or very small, depending on her mood. Today she was surrounded by her usual group, planning something that had everyone excited. "So we're confirmed for the 27th then," Olivia said, loud enough for the whole department to hear. "The annual potluck is officially on. I've got the sign-up sheet ready." She held up a clipboard with flourish. People began gathering around her desk. Lynn watched from the corner of her eye while pretending to focus on her work. These office gatherings made her nervous. Back home she'd been different, more confident, more herself. But here, in this new city, in this new job, she deliberately made herself small. It was easier that way, safer. "Hey, new girl." Olivia's voice cut through Lynn's thoughts. "You too. Come sign up." Lynn looked up, startled to be addressed directly. Everyone was looking at her now. She slowly rose and walked over to the group, feeling their eyes following her movement. "It's Lynn," she said quietly. "Right, Lynn," Olivia smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You've been here, 3 weeks now? Time to join in the fun. The annual potluck is our biggest department event. Everyone brings something." Lynn nodded, taking the clipboard when it was handed to her. The sheet was divided into categories: appetizers, sides, main dishes, desserts, and drinks. Most slots were already filled with names. She hesitated, pen hovering over the paper. "Not much of a cook?" asked David, one of the senior accountants, with a hint of amusement in his voice. Lynn started, but Olivia cut her off. "Oh, put her down for a main dish, David," Olivia said with a sly smile. "We need more of those, and I'm sure she can handle at least a casserole or something." There were a few poorly hidden smirks among the group. Lynn realized this was some kind of test, or worse, a joke. The main dishes were clearly the most important contributions. Looking at the names already signed up, she recognized the office's social elite, people who regularly brought impressive homemade treats to share. "I can bring a main dish," Lynn said, her voice a touch firmer than usual. She wrote her name in one of the empty slots, aware of the skeptical glances being exchanged. "Great!" Olivia took back the clipboard with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Can't wait to see what you come up with." As the group dispersed, Lynn overheard whispers. $10 as it's store-bought. If she even remembers to bring anything at all. Lynn returned to her desk, her cheeks warm. She opened her desk drawer and pretended to look for something while taking a few deep breaths. It wasn't the first time she'd been underestimated, but it still stung. Through the morning, people stopped by Olivia's desk to sign up, and Lynn noticed how differently Olivia treated them. Warm hugs for her friends, genuine interest in what they might bring, suggestions for those who seemed uncertain. No one had suggested they bring a main dish as a joke. At lunchtime, most of the department headed out together. Nobody invited Lynn. She pulled out her brown bag and ate her simple sandwich at her desk, scrolling through her phone. She pulled up a photo she rarely looked at anymore. A younger version of herself standing proudly in a pristine kitchen, holding a gleaming trophy. The woman in the photo was beaming with confidence, surrounded by admiring faces. Lynn quickly closed the image when she heard footsteps approaching. Not joining the lunch crowd? It was Hector, an older accountant who kept to himself almost as much as Lynn did. "Not today," she replied. Hector nodded understandingly. Took me 6 months to get invited when I started. This bunch can be a tight circle. He gestured to the potluck sign-up sheet on Olivia's empty desk. Got roped into the big event, huh? Seems like it. What do they stick you with? Main dish, Lynn said. Hector raised his eyebrows. Throwing you into the deep end. That's usually reserved for the kitchen superstars or the people they want to see fail. Lynn gave a small smile. And which category do you think I'm in? Well, they don't know you well enough to consider you a superstar, so... He shrugged apologetically. I figured as much. Lynn took another bite of her sandwich. If you want my advice, bring something simple but reliable. Nobody remembers the okay dishes, but they never forget the disasters. Lynn nodded thoughtfully. I'll keep that in mind. The afternoon dragged on with meetings and spreadsheets. Lynn stayed focused on her work, though her mind occasionally drifted to the potluck. By 5 o'clock, as people began packing up to leave, the event had grown in significance. She heard people discussing previous year's highlights and failures. Remember when Paul brought that seafood thing that smelled like low tide? Or when Deepa's homemade bread was so hard it could have been used as a doorstop? These stories were shared with good-natured laughter, but Lynn couldn't help noticing how the teller's eyes occasionally drifted toward her, as if anticipating adding her name to the list of office cooking failures. Lynn was one of the last to leave. As she waited for the elevator, Olivia and her friend Zach joined her. So, Lynn, Olivia said, filling the awkward silence, what are you planning to make for the potluck? I haven't decided yet, Lynn answered quietly. Well, don't stress too much about it, Zach said with faux kindness. Nobody expects miracles from the new person. That's right, Olivia agreed. Just don't poison anyone and you'll be fine. They both laughed as if they'd said something hilarious. The elevator arrived, and the short ride down was filled with Olivia and Zach's chatter about weekend plans, with Lynn standing silently in the corner. They walked ahead of her through the lobby without a goodbye. Outside, rain had started to fall. Lynn pulled her cardigan tighter and began her walk to the bus stop. As she waited for the bus, she pulled out her phone again and opened a different photo. This one showing a complex, beautifully plated dish that looked like it belonged in a high-end restaurant. Her finger traced the image gently. The bus arrived, splashing through a puddle that soaked the bottom of Lynn's pants. She sighed and boarded, finding a seat near the back. As the city lights blurred through the rain-streaked windows, Lynn's expression slowly changed. The meek, uncertain look gave way to something more determined, more focused. By the time she reached her stop, a plan was forming. She walked 3 blocks to a small international grocery store. Inside, she greeted the owner by name, one of the few people in this new city who knew anything real about her. The usual today, Lynn? The older woman asked. Not today, Mrs. Wu. I need something special this time. Lynn's voice had changed. It was clearer, more confident. I'm cooking for some people from work. Ah, finally showing them what you can do? Lynn smiled, a real smile that transformed her face. They think they're playing a joke on me. We'll see who's laughing after they taste my food. Mrs. Wu chuckled appreciatively. I have some special imports that came in yesterday. Only the best for my favorite chef. As Lynn selected ingredients with expert precision, the quiet, overlooked accountant seemed to fade away, replaced by someone altogether different. Someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Back in her small apartment, Lynn unlocked a cabinet she hadn't opened since moving here. Inside were specialized cooking tools, a collection of rare spices, and a well-worn notebook filled with handwritten recipes. She ran her fingers over the embossed words on the notebook's cover. Champion recipes. Time to cook, she whispered to herself, a gleam in her eye that none of her co-workers would have recognized. Lynn's apartment was small but neat, with minimal furniture and decorations. Most people would call it sparse. What they wouldn't know was that she had deliberately chosen this place for one feature alone. The kitchen. While the living room contained just a basic sofa and a small TV, her kitchen was a different world. Lynn flipped a switch and bright professional-grade lighting illuminated the space. The countertops were pristine quartz, the appliances high-end and perfectly maintained. A magnetic strip on one wall held a collection of Japanese knives, each one worth more than most people spent on their entire kitchen setup. Lynn slipped off her cardigan and work clothes, changing into comfortable pants and a well-worn t-shirt with a faded logo of a cooking competition from 5 years earlier. She tied her hair back with practiced efficiency and washed her hands, scrubbing thoroughly like a surgeon prepping for an operation. 3 days until the potluck, she murmured to herself. Time to get started. She opened her recipe notebook to a blank page and began sketching. This wasn't just about cooking something good, it was about strategy. She needed a dish that would travel well, serve 20 people, impress without seeming like she was trying too hard, and most importantly, silence the doubters. Her phone rang, interrupting her planning. The caller ID showed Uncle Wei. She smiled and answered. Uncle, good timing. I need your advice. Lynn! Finally, you call your old uncle. How is the new job with all those numbers? Are you bored to death yet? His voice was warm and teasing. Actually, I have a cooking challenge, Lynn explained the situation at work. Uncle Wei laughed loudly. So these office people, they think you can't cook? Oh, what I would give to see their faces. His laughter continued. What will you make to shock them? That's why I'm calling. I'm thinking something traditional but with my own twist. Something that tells a story. Ah, now you're thinking like the champion you are, Uncle Wei said, his voice softer now. You know what your grandmother always said. Food without a story is just ingredients. They spent the next half hour discussing options, with Uncle Wei suggesting ingredients that would be in season and techniques that would showcase Lynn's skills without seeming pretentious. By the time they hung up, Lynn had a clear vision. A 5-spice braised pork belly with handmade buns, she decided, writing it down. Simple enough to seem approachable, complex enough to be unforgettable. She made a detailed shopping list, separating items by where she would need to buy them. The international market for specialty ingredients, the farmer's market for fresh produce, and the high-end butcher across town for the perfect cut of pork. The next day at work, Lynn maintained her quiet demeanor. She overheard more conversations about the potluck, including speculation about what she might bring. Maybe she'll just pick up some fried rice from the mall food court, Olivia said to Tyler, loud enough for Lynn to hear. Lynn just kept typing, her face betraying nothing. During her lunch break, she called the butcher to place a special order. Yes, I need 5 pounds of pork belly, skin on, and I'd like it from the Berkshire pigs if you have them. She spoke softly into her phone in the break room. This is Lynn May. Yes, that Lynn May. Thank you. I appreciate your discretion. After work, she headed to the farmer's market. It was crowded with after-work shoppers, but Lynn moved with purpose. At the organic vegetable stand, she carefully selected scallions, testing their freshness by checking the firmness of the white parts. You have a good eye, the vendor commented. Lynn just smiled and moved on to select ginger, garlic, and fresh herbs. Each item was chosen with careful consideration. This cucumber, too watery. That bok choy, too wilted, these mushrooms perfect. At the international market, Mrs. Wu had already set aside some items based on their conversation. I found the fermented bean paste you like, the one from the small producer in Sichuan, Mrs. Wu said proudly. And these dried tangerine peels are 3 years old, perfect flavor. You're a lifesaver, Mrs. Wu, Lynn said, examining the ingredients with approval. Will you make your famous red oil for this dish? Mrs. Wu asked. Lynn shook her head. Not this time. I'm saving that for when they beg me to cook for them again. Both women laughed at this. Back at her apartment, Lynn unloaded her purchases and began organizing. She filled a large pot with water for blanching the pork belly, added aromatics, and set it to boil. While waiting, she toasted her spices in a dry pan. Star anise, cinnamon, Sichuan peppercorns, cloves, and fennel seeds, filling her apartment with a fragrant cloud that brought back memories of cooking alongside her grandmother. She blanched the pork belly to remove impurities, then patted it dry. With practiced precision, she scored the skin in a crosshatch pattern, careful not to cut into the meat. Then she prepared the braising liquid, a complex mixture of soy sauce, rice wine, rock sugar, and her toasted spices. The pork would need to marinate overnight, so she sealed it in a container and placed it in the refrigerator. She cleaned her kitchen meticulously before going to bed. Everything returned to its proper place. The next 2 days followed a similar pattern, appearing ordinary and unremarkable at work while transforming into a culinary artist at home. She prepared each component of her dish with meticulous attention to detail. The dough for the buns was mixed and kneaded by hand until it had just the right elasticity. The vegetables were cut with perfect uniformity. The sauce was balanced and rebalanced until it had the exact right notes of sweet, salty, and umami. On the evening before the potluck, Lynn did a full test run. She cooked a small portion of everything, plated it beautifully, and took a photo. Then she tasted it, closing her eyes to focus completely on the flavors and textures. It was good, very good, but something was missing. She consulted her notebook, reviewing her grandmother's notes in the margins of the original recipe. For special occasions, add a hint of orange blossom. The faded. Handwriting advised. Lynn opened a small cabinet above her refrigerator and took out a collection of small dropper bottles and her precious collection of essences and extracts from around the world. She selected one, adding just 2 drops to her sauce, then tasted again. Perfect, she whispered. Satisfied at last, she packed her cooking equipment for the next day, a portable induction burner, her special steamer setup, and containers for each component. Everything was labeled and organized in her large cooler bag. Before going to bed, Lynn pulled out an old photo album. Inside were pictures from her culinary career, standing with famous chefs, receiving trophies, teaching masterclasses in gleaming professional kitchens. Her finger traced over a newspaper headline. Lynn May, the Phoenix chef, takes world title for unprecedented 10th time. It's been a while, she said softly to the smiling woman in the photos. Since moving to this new city and taking the accounting job, she had deliberately stepped away from that life, needing a break from the constant pressure and attention. No one at Westfield Corporation knew about her past, and she had wanted to keep it that way. But now, facing the casual dismissal from her colleagues, something of the old fire had rekindled. Not a desire for fame or recognition, but simply the joy of cooking for others and the quiet pride in doing something exceptionally well. Lynn closed the album and checked her preparations one last time. Everything was ready. On the morning of the potluck, she dressed with slightly more care than usual, still modest and unassuming, but her blue blouse was crisply pressed and she wore a simple silver necklace with a tiny knife charm, a gift from Uncle Wei when she won her first championship. She loaded her cooler bag and equipment into her car, a practical sedan that gave no hint of the culinary treasures it now contained. The drive to work was filled with a calm focus she hadn't felt in months. This wasn't about showing off or seeking approval. It was about being true to herself and her art. As she pulled into the company parking lot, she spotted Olivia and some others arriving. They were carrying store-bought desserts and simple side dishes. Olivia noticed Lynn struggling with her large cooler bag and raised an eyebrow. Need help with all that? Equipment? Olivia asked, a hint of mockery in her voice. No thanks, Lynn replied with a small smile. I've got it. Wow, you really went all out, Zach commented, eyeing the professional-grade gear. It's just an office potluck, you know. Lynn just nodded and continued toward the building. Let them think what they wanted. In a few hours, her food would speak for itself. The accounting department's conference room had been transformed for the potluck, with tables arranged along the walls for the food, and the center cleared for people to mingle. Lynn found an outlet for her portable burner and began setting up her station with quiet efficiency. People glanced curiously at her setup, but continued their conversations.
No one except Hector came over to ask what she was making. Something that tells a story, Lynn told him with a cryptic smile. As the room filled with more colleagues arriving with their contributions,
Lynn focused on her final preparations. The pork belly, which had been braising for hours the night before, was sliced with surgical precision. The buns were arranged in her bamboo steamer, ready to be heated at the last moment. Lynn checked the clock on the wall. Almost time. She took a deep breath and adjusted the flame on her burner. Behind her quiet exterior, the Phoenix chef was ready to rise again. The conference room buzzed with activity as noon approached. Olivia directed traffic, telling people where to place their dishes on the long tables. Paper plates, plastic utensils, and napkins were stacked neatly at one end. The room filled with the mingled aromas of pasta salads, store-bought cookies, and someone's slightly burnt casserole. Lynn worked silently at her station in the corner. Most people were too busy chatting and setting up their own contributions to pay her much attention, though a few cast curious glances her way. Her portable burner was heating the steamer filled with her handmade buns. The sliced pork belly was arranged in a container, waiting for final assembly. Small dishes held various garnishes and sauces, each one precisely prepared. Smells good over here, Hector commented, approaching Lynn's station. Whatever you're making, it's definitely not from the supermarket deli counter. Lynn smiled. Thank you. It's almost ready. Need any help? He offered. Actually, yes. Could you let everyone know I'll be serving in about 10 minutes? I'd like to plate each serving fresh. Hector nodded and moved away to spread the word. Across the room, Olivia was making an announcement about the order of the potluck. But she paused when she saw Hector talking to people and gesturing toward Lynn. Is there a problem? Olivia asked, walking over to Lynn's station with a hint of annoyance. No problem, Lynn replied calmly. I just need a few more minutes to finish. Olivia looked over Lynn's setup with poorly disguised skepticism. This seems elaborate for an office potluck. People usually just bring something that's ready to serve. I prefer to serve this dish fresh, Lynn explained, adjusting the flame under her steamer. Well, we're starting now, so people will get to yours when they get to yours, Olivia said with a shrug, walking away. Lynn continued her preparations unbothered. Years of working in high-pressure kitchens had made her immune to such minor tensions. She checked her steamer. The buns were perfectly fluffy, their tops just beginning to split in the traditional way that would show her colleagues they were handmade, not store-bought. The potluck began with people lining up to fill their plates. Most bypassed Lynn's empty serving area, planning to circle back when whatever she was making was ready. Lynn didn't rush. She arranged her serving station with the same care she would have used in a five-star restaurant. The sauce in a small pouring jug, the garnishes in neat piles, chopsticks and small serving spoons laid out precisely. Just as she was ready to begin, the conference room door opened. A tall man in an expensive suit entered, followed by two other executives. Lynn recognized him immediately as Richard Wong, the company's chief financial officer, though they had never spoken. He had visited the accounting department only once since she'd started working there. Sorry to interrupt your lunch, Richard announced to the room. Just wanted to introduce our visitors from the Singapore office. They'll be here all week for the quarterly review. The room murmured with polite greetings. Olivia immediately moved to welcome the executives, clearly eager to make a good impression. Lynn kept her head down, focusing on assembling the first few servings of her dish. She placed a steaming bun on each plate, sliced it partially open, and filled it with perfectly lacquered pieces of pork belly, a drizzle of her special sauce, a sprinkle of finely sliced scallions and crispy shallots, and each plate was ready. Something smells amazing, one of the visiting executives commented, looking around the room. We have quite a spread, Olivia said proudly, beginning to guide them toward the food tables. Richard Wong was scanning the room when his eyes landed on Lynn. He stopped mid-step, staring at her with a look of confusion that quickly turned to astonishment. Is that Lynn May? He asked loud enough for nearby conversations to pause. Lynn looked up, meeting his eyes with a small smile. Hello, Mr. Wong. Richard broke into a wide grin and strode across the room toward her. I can't believe it. Lynn May working in our accounting department? No wonder something smelled so incredible. The room had gone quiet. Everyone was watching the exchange with confusion. You know each other? Olivia asked, looking between them. Know each other? Richard laughed. I've been trying to get a reservation at her restaurant in Hong Kong for 3 years. Lynn May is only the most celebrated chef in all of Asia. A murmur went through the room. Lynn continued calmly plating her food as if the growing commotion wasn't happening. There must be some mistake, Zach said, stepping forward. This is Lynn from accounting. She just started a few weeks ago. No mistake, Richard insisted. I'd recognize the Phoenix chef anywhere. My wife and I watched every episode of her cooking competition show. 10 consecutive championships. Undefeated! The visiting executives had moved closer, one of them pulling out his phone. It is her, he confirmed, showing a photo on his screen to those nearby. Look, here she is receiving the Golden Cleaver Award last year. People crowded around to see the photo, then turned to stare at Lynn with new eyes. Lynn finished plating another serving, her movements precise and unhurried. Is this true? Olivia asked, her voice a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror as she realized how they had treated a celebrity. Lynn finally looked up, addressing the whole room. I took a break from the culinary world to explore other interests. Accounting was my first degree, before cooking took over my life. Her voice was calm with no hint of resentment or triumph. Would anyone like to try my 5-spice pork belly buns? They're ready to serve. There was a moment of stunned silence, then a rush toward Lin's station. Richard Wong was first in line, accepting a plate with the reverence of someone receiving a precious gift. "I can't believe I'm actually tasting Lin May's cooking," he said before taking a bite. His eyes closed in appreciation. "Absolutely incredible. Just as amazing as I imagined." One by one, Lin's colleagues tasted her food, the room filled with exclamations of delight and wonder. Even the most skeptical were won over by the perfect balance of flavors, the meltingly tender pork, and the cloud-like texture of the buns. "The depth of flavor is remarkable," one of the Singapore executives commented. "I detect at least 15 different spices, yet none overwhelms the others." "The technique on this pork belly is flawless," said another. "It must have taken days to prepare." Lin served each person with quiet dignity, answering questions about her cooking with modest expertise. The conversation in the room had completely shifted, with people peppering her with questions about her culinary career. "Why did you leave the restaurant business?" Tyler asked between enthusiastic bites. "I needed a change," Lin replied simply. "After 10 years in the spotlight, I wanted to remember what it felt like to be ordinary again." "But why our accounting department?" someone else asked. Lin smiled. "It was available, and I'm actually quite good with numbers. Cooking and accounting both require precision and attention to detail." Olivia hovered at the edge of the group, her face flushed with embarrassment. When there was a lull in the conversation, she approached Lin. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. I was not very welcoming. And then assigning you the main dish as a sort of joke." She trailed off, clearly mortified. "No apology needed," Lin said, handing her a plate. "Try it before it gets cold." Olivia took a bite and her eyes widened. "This is the best thing I've ever tasted," she admitted. Richard Wong had been making calls on his cell phone, and now he approached Lin again. "Our CEO is on his way down. He's a huge foodie and nearly fell out of his chair when I told him who works in our accounting department." Lin nodded, unfazed by the prospect of meeting another executive. She had cooked for presidents and royalty. A company CEO didn't rattle her. As more colleagues finished their food and returned for seconds, the mood in the room had transformed completely. Lin was no longer the forgettable new person but the center of attention. Yet she remained the same, efficient, focused, and modest, serving each person with equal care. Hector appeared at her side with a fresh drink for her. "You knew they were underestimating you all along," he said with a grin. "Must feel pretty good to see their faces now." Lin accepted the drink with a nod of thanks. "It's not about proving anything," she said. "It's just about the food. I cook because I love it, not for the recognition." "Still," Hector persisted, "you have to admit it's satisfying to see Olivia and her crowd so humbled." Lin glanced across the room, where Olivia was animatedly telling another group about how our department has a world-famous chef, already shifting the narrative to associate herself with Lin's success. "People are who they are," Lin said philosophically. "The food is what matters." "Did you try some?" "It's incredible," Hector assured her. "But I think I understand now why you chose to keep your talents hidden. Once people know what you can do, they never see you the same way again." Lin nodded, a hint of sadness crossing her face. "It's hard to just be a person when everyone sees you as a chef. That's why I wanted to start fresh here." "So what happens now?" Hector asked. Lin looked around the room at her colleagues enjoying her food, at the executives on their phones spreading the word about her presence, at the building excitement as people from other departments began appearing at the door, drawn by the rumors of a celebrity in their midst. "Now," Lin said with a small sigh, "I've finished serving lunch. Tomorrow, we'll see." Word spread through Westfield Corporation like wildfire. Within 30 minutes of Richard Wong's announcement, the accounting department's conference room was packed beyond capacity. People from every floor and department found excuses to stop by, all hoping to taste the famous Phoenix chef's cooking and catch a glimpse of the celebrity hiding in their midst. Lin continued serving her pork belly buns with calm efficiency, somehow making her supplies stretch to accommodate the unexpected crowd. When her original batch ran low, she simply pulled additional containers from her cooler bag and prepared more servings. She had anticipated interest, but not this level of excitement. Still, years of cooking for unpredictable numbers had taught her to always prepare extra. "Did you make all this just last night?" someone from marketing asked, watching Lynn's hands move with practiced precision. "Over 3 days, actually," Lynn replied as she garnished another plate. "Good food takes time." People listened to her explanations with rapt attention, hanging on every word as she briefly described her cooking process. Many were filming with their phones, though Lynn politely asked them not to post anything online. "I'm still enjoying my break from public life," she explained. The company's CEO, Thomas Chen, arrived with an entourage of executives. He was a serious man in his 60s who rarely visited the lower floors, yet here he was, making a beeline for Lynn's station with an expression of barely contained excitement. "Ms. Lynn," he said formally, extending his hand, "I can't believe we've had the honor of your presence in our company without knowing it. I'm a tremendous admirer of your work." "Thank you, Mr. Chen," Lynn replied with a respectful nod. "Would you like to try some?" "I would consider it a privilege," he said, accepting a plate from her. The room fell quiet as the CEO took his first bite. His eyes widened, then closed in appreciation. "Remarkable," he declared. "Absolutely remarkable. The balance of flavors, the texture. This is why you're a legend." Lynn smiled modestly and continued serving others. She could feel Olivia hovering nearby, clearly desperate to insert herself into this interaction between Lynn and the CEO, but uncertain how to do so. Lynn took pity on her. "Olivia organized this wonderful potluck," Lynn told Mr. Chen, gesturing toward her. "It's brought the department together nicely." Grateful for the introduction, Olivia stepped forward. "We do it every year, but this is obviously special. We had no idea we had such talent in our department. Sometimes the most extraordinary people prefer to remain ordinary," Mr. Chen said thoughtfully, looking at Lynn. "Though talent like this is difficult to hide." As the meal continued, Lynn noticed the subtle shifts in how people approached her. Those who had ignored her for weeks now waited patiently to introduce themselves. Colleagues who had never spared her a second glance now studied her movements with fascination. The invisible wall between Lynn and the rest of the office had vanished, replaced by an equally uncomfortable pedestals. "Have you tried the other dishes?" Lynn asked when there was a lull in the line. "There are some wonderful contributions." People seemed startled by the suggestion, as if they'd forgotten there was food besides Lynn's. Slowly, attention spread to the other dishes on the table, though conversations throughout the room remained focused on Lynn and her surprising secret identity. Zach approached with Tyler, both looking sheepish. "So, 10-time world champion, huh?" Zach said awkwardly. "The competitions were just one part of my career," Lynn replied. "I looked you up," Tyler admitted, showing his phone. "You have 3 Michelin stars. Your restaurant in Hong Kong has a 2-year waiting list. There are YouTube videos of you with millions of views." Lynn nodded. "That was my life for a long time. But why accounting?" Zach asked, the question everyone had been wondering. "And why here?" "You could work anywhere." Lynn considered her answer carefully. "After years of heat and pressure and cameras, I wanted quiet. I wanted to use a different part of my brain. And I wanted to go somewhere no one would look for a famous chef." "Well, that worked for about 3 weeks," Tyler said with a laugh. As the potluck began winding down, people reluctantly returned to their desks, though many lingered, hoping for a few more minutes in Lynn's presence. She began cleaning her station with the same methodical care she'd shown in her cooking. "Please, let me help with that," Olivia offered, reaching for a container. "Thank you," Lynn said, handing her a stack of empty plates instead. They worked side by side for a few minutes, an awkward silence between them until Olivia finally spoke. "I feel terrible about how we treated you," she admitted. "Not just the potluck thing, but everything. We weren't very welcoming." "It's okay," Lynn said. "I wasn't trying to make friends." "Still, we were snobby and exclusive for no reason," Olivia persisted. "And now I feel even worse knowing who you really are." Lynn paused her cleaning and looked directly at Olivia. "Who I really am is the same person I was yesterday and the day before. I'm still just Lynn who works in accounting." Olivia had the grace to look embarrassed. "Of course, but you know what I mean. You're important, connected. I saw how the CEO talked to you." Lynn resumed packing up her supplies. "Fame is strange that way. It changes how people see you but not who you are." As the room cleared out, Mr. Chen approached Lynn again. "Ms. Lynn, I wonder if I might have a word with you in private." Lynn nodded, following him to a quiet corner. Richard Wong joined them. I respect your desire for privacy, Mr. Chen began. But I have to ask, would you consider a small private dinner? My wife is hosting some important clients next week, and it would be an incredible honor to have you cook for them. Lynn had been expecting this. It always started with just one small dinner. I'm flattered, but I'm here as an accountant, not a chef, she replied politely. Of course, Mr. Chen backtracked quickly, and we value your work in that role. Your supervisor tells me you're quite skilled with numbers as well, but perhaps, as a special favor, we would compensate you generously, of course. Lynn glanced around the room. Her colleagues were trying to pretend they weren't watching this exchange while obviously straining to hear every word. Perhaps we could discuss this another time, she suggested. Certainly, Mr. Chen agreed, handing her his business card. Call my office any time. My assistant will put you straight through. As Lynn finished packing up her cooler, Hector helped her carry her equipment. So much for flying under the radar, he commented. Yes, it seems my quiet life was shorter than I'd hoped, Lynn admitted. What will you do now? Lynn shrugged. Come to work tomorrow. Continue balancing spreadsheets. You really think that's possible after today? Hector asked skeptically. Before Lynn could answer, her phone chimed with a message. Then another. And another. What's happening? Hector asked as the notifications kept coming. Lynn checked her screen and sighed. Someone posted about me online. Tagged in a company photo, probably. My agent is calling. And some food bloggers I know, and a TV producer. I'm sorry, Hector said, genuinely sympathetic. It's okay. This was always a risk. Lynn zipped up her cooler bag with finality. I got a few weeks of normal life. That's something. Back at her desk, Lynn found a small crowd waiting. People with questions, compliments, and requests for cooking advice. She answered patiently. But as the afternoon wore on, she found it increasingly difficult to return to her spreadsheets. Every few minutes, someone would stop by with a question or just to introduce themselves. Near the end of the day, Olivia approached again, this time with an official-looking envelope. Mr. Chen asked me to give you this, she said, placing it on Lynn's desk. Lynn opened it after Olivia left. Inside was a formal invitation to a small dinner gathering at the Chen residence, along with a personal note from Mrs. Chen expressing her admiration. Lynn had received countless such invitations over the years. They always described the event as small and intimate, though they seldom were. She was slipping the invitation into her bag when Tyler appeared at her desk. A bunch of us are going out for drinks after work, he said. We'd love for you to join us. Everyone wants to hear more about your cooking adventures. Lynn hesitated. 3 weeks of being ignored, and now suddenly everyone wanted her company. The invitation was friendly enough, but she knew what it would be like. An evening of being the center of attention, answering the same questions over and over, being Lynn May, the Phoenix chef, rather than just Lynn from accounting. Thank you. But I have plans tonight, she said politely. Another time then, Tyler said, though they both knew the dynamic had permanently changed. As Lynn gathered her things to leave, her phone rang again. Uncle Wei's name flashed on the screen. I just got 6 calls about you, he said when she answered. The news is out, Phoenix. It was bound to happen eventually, Lynn replied, walking toward the elevator. So what now? Back to the bright lights? Lynn stepped into the empty elevator and watched the doors close. For a moment, she was alone with her thoughts. I don't know, Uncle. I really don't know. When she reached her car, Lynn sat quietly for a moment before starting the engine. Her phone continued to buzz with notifications and messages, the outside world rushing back in. She thought about her small, peaceful apartment with its magnificent kitchen. She thought about the joy she'd felt cooking again, creating something special. She thought about the faces of everyone who had tasted her food today, the genuine pleasure she had given them. Then she thought about the spreadsheets on her desk, the simple rhythm of her days before today, the luxury of being unnoticed. As she drove home through the evening traffic, Lynn knew she stood at a crossroads. The quiet life she had built was slipping away, but something else was taking its place, something both familiar and new. The question was, would she embrace it or try to hide away once more? Her phone rang again. This time it was a number she hadn't seen in over a year, her old television producer. Lynn took a deep breath and pressed the answer button. 2 weeks had passed since the potluck that changed everything. Lynn sat at her desk, working through a complicated spreadsheet with the same quiet focus she always had. Yet nothing else remained the same. Her desk, once bare of all personal items, now held a small potted herb plant, a gift from the accounting team. A stack of cookbooks waited by her computer, brought in by colleagues hoping for autographs. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications, which she mostly ignored during work hours. Lynn had declined the TV producer's offer to return to her cooking show. She had politely refused 3 restaurant opportunities and a cookbook deal, but she had accepted Mr. Chen's dinner invitation, with conditions. "I'm an accountant from 9 to 5, she had told him firmly. "If I cook for your event, it will be as an independent professional, not as your employee." Mr. Chen had readily agreed, relieved she hadn't refused outright. Lynn had set her consulting fee high enough to discourage casual requests, but not so high as to seem exploitative. The dinner was scheduled for the coming weekend. "Lynn, do you have the quarterly projections?" It was Walter, her supervisor, standing awkwardly by her desk. Since the revelation, he had been treating her with an odd mixture of deference and confusion, clearly unsure how to manage someone more famous than he was. "Yes, right here." Lynn handed him the file. "I added some notes on the third quarter variance. There's a pattern that might help with next year's budget." Walter took the file with a nod. "Thanks, this is good work." He hesitated, then added, "Are you happy here? In accounting, I mean?" Lynn considered the question. "I am," she said simply. "Numbers have their own kind of precision, like recipes. Both need balance." Walter seemed relieved. The company executives had been concerned she might leave now that her cover was blown. Good. By the way, my wife was wondering if you might recommend a good wok. She's been trying to improve her stir-fry technique." Lynn smiled. This had become routine, colleagues finding excuses to ask cooking questions. "Tell her carbon steel, at least 2 mm thick, hand-hammered if possible." After Walter left, Lynn returned to her spreadsheets. The work actually was satisfying in its own way. Different from cooking, yet with similar requirements for attention to detail and understanding of how components work together. At lunchtime, Lynn no longer ate alone at her desk. Whether she wanted it or not, she had become the center of the office social scene. Today she sat in the break room with a small group that included Hector, Tyler, and 3 others from the department. "So what's it like having 3 Michelin stars?" one of them asked between bites of sandwich. "Stressful," Lynn answered honestly. "You wake up every day knowing those stars could disappear if anything goes wrong." "The pressure never stops. Is that why you left?" Tyler asked. Lynn nodded. "Partly. I started cooking because I loved it. Somewhere along the way, it became about maintaining a reputation instead." "Do you miss it?" Hector asked. He had become something of a friend since the potluck, one of the few people who treated her normally. Lynn thought about it. "I miss the creativity, the feeling when a new dish comes together perfectly." She smiled slightly. "I don't miss the 14-hour days or the critics analyzing every bite." The conversation shifted to other topics. Lynn was grateful when people could talk about something besides her cooking career. These moments, when she was just another colleague discussing weekend plans or complaining about traffic, were precious and increasingly rare. After lunch, Lynn returned to her desk to find Olivia waiting for her. Their relationship had been strained since the potluck, with Olivia swinging between excessive friendliness and obvious discomfort. "I was hoping to catch you," Olivia said, perched on the edge of Lynn's desk. "A bunch of us are going to happy hour tonight. We'd really love it if you could join us." "Thank you for the invitation," Lynn said, "but I need to prep for Mr. Chen's dinner this weekend." "Oh, right." Olivia looked disappointed. "That must be a lot of work." "It is," Lynn confirmed. "Cooking for 12 takes planning." Olivia hesitated. "I've been wanting to apologize properly. For everything. The way we treated you when you first started." "It wasn't kind," Lynn regarded her thoughtfully. "People make judgments based on what they see. I understand that." "Still, we were wrong about you," Olivia persisted. "Were you?" Lynn asked. "Or did you just find out I had a different value to you than you initially thought?" Olivia looked taken aback. "That's not... I mean..." "It's okay," Lynn said, her voice gentler. "We all do it. We categorize people based on what they can offer us. Famous chef, quiet accountant, either way, it's not seeing the whole person." Olivia was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. "I never thought about it that way." "Few people do," Lynn said with a small smile. After Olivia left, Lynn checked her email. Among the usual work messages was one from Uncle Wei, with a subject line that made her pause. A third path? Opening it, she found a thoughtful proposal. Uncle Wei had been thinking about her situation, caught between the quiet life she sought and the culinary world that kept pulling her back. He suggested a cooking school, not a large commercial operation, but a small, intimate setting where she could teach a few dedicated students at a time. Share your knowledge without the spotlight, he wrote. Keep your day job if you want, but don't let your gift go unused. The idea settled in Lynn's mind, taking root. It had possibilities. That evening, Lynn worked in her kitchen preparing components for Mr. Chen's dinner. Her phone rang. The TV producer again, still hoping to persuade her to return to the screen. Lynn declined politely but firmly. As she hung up, she looked around her kitchen at the ingredients laid out with precise care, at the notebook open to a recipe she was adapting. Cooking had been her life for so long. Walking away completely had felt like the only option when the pressure became too much. But now she wondered if there was another way. The weekend came, and with it, Mr. Chen's dinner party. Lynn arrived early, bringing her equipment and pre-prepped ingredients. The Chen home was luxurious but tasteful, with a kitchen that any chef would envy. "We're so honored to have you here," Mrs. Chen gushed, showing Lynn around the kitchen. "Our guests can't believe they'll be eating food prepared by the Phoenix chef herself." Lynn smiled politely, though inwardly she sighed. Always the Phoenix chef, never just Lynn. She set up her workspace and began cooking, falling into the familiar rhythm. Despite her complicated feelings about returning to professional cooking, she couldn't deny the satisfaction it brought her. Each knife cut, each adjustment of heat, each taste test, these small actions added up to something meaningful. The dinner was a success, of course. The guests raved about each course, taking photos and asking endless questions. Lynn answered graciously, though she kept her responses brief. She was here to cook, not to perform. As she served the dessert course, a delicate balance of sweet, tart and savory elements, one guest, an older woman, said something unexpected. "You seem different from your television persona," she observed. "More at peace." Lynn looked up, surprised by the insight. "I am," she acknowledged. "I needed to step away to remember why I started cooking in the first place." "And why was that?" the woman asked. "To create something that brings joy," Lynn answered simply. "Not for the accolades or the stars," the woman nodded. "The best work always comes from that place." Later, as Lynn was packing up, Mr. Chen approached with the promised payment and a generous tip. "My guests are still talking about your food," he said proudly. "Would you consider making this a regular arrangement? Monthly, perhaps?" Lynn had been expecting this question. She had prepared a firm but polite refusal. But instead, she heard herself saying, "Let me think about it. I may have an alternative proposal." The following Monday, Lynn requested a meeting with Mr. Chen and the head of Human Resources. She arrived with a clear plan, inspired by Uncle Wei's email and her own reflections over the weekend. "I would like to propose a new position," she explained, laying out a document she had prepared. "Corporate culinary educator." Mr. Chen looked intrigued. "Go on." "I would work in accounting 4 days a week and spend 1 day teaching cooking classes for employees and their families. Team building, cultural exchange through food, nutrition education, all valuable benefits for the company." The HR director looked skeptical. "That's an unusual arrangement." "So is having a world-famous chef in your accounting department," Lynn pointed out with a smile. Mr. Chen laughed. "She has you there. I think it's brilliant. We get to keep your financial expertise and share your culinary knowledge with the company." The details were worked out over the next week. Lynn would keep her accounting role but have the flexibility to teach and occasionally cater special company events. It wasn't what she had planned when she joined Westfield seeking anonymity, but it was a balance she could live with, one that honored both sides of herself. Word spread quickly about the new cooking classes. The first session filled up within minutes of being announced. Even Olivia signed up, though she seemed nervous about cooking under Lynn's watchful eye. "Don't worry," Lynn told her as they set up for the first class. "Everyone burns things sometimes. Even me." Olivia looked relieved. "Really? The great Phoenix chef makes mistakes?" Lynn laughed. "Of course. That's how we learn." She handed Olivia an apron. "Today we're all just people who love food. Nothing more, nothing less." As the classroom filled with eager colleagues, some she knew well, others she was meeting for the first time, Lynn felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Not the pressure of perfection or the weight of her reputation, but the simple joy of sharing knowledge. "Welcome," she said, looking around at the faces watching her with excitement. "Today we start with the basics. The foundation of good cooking isn't fancy techniques or expensive ingredients. It's understanding how flavors work together to tell a story." And as she began to teach, Lynn knew she had found her third path, not hiding from her talent, not being defined by it, but sharing it on her own terms. The Phoenix chef would always be part of her, but here, in this moment, she was simply Lynn, doing what she loved, exactly the way she wanted to do it.